Welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato. Our segment today is on the generational divide in America. We're going to primarily look at the divide between the baby boomers and every other generation. So let's take a minute to discuss the graph here. And we see on the graph that we have baby boomer data from around their mid 35s to over 60. And for millennials, this is from a few years ago. And so we have some millennial data from a little bit past 30 years of age. And we see comparing about 32-ish for millennials to 35-ish for baby boomers, that the baby boomers have significantly more wealth than either the millennials or the Generation X. And we see that it's probably not because of factors like education, because the millennials are the most educated generation in history. So, what are the causes for baby boomers having so much more wealth as a generation compared to other generations after them? Well, I think I have an answer for you. So, throughout history, progress has been made because every generation has been willing to sacrifice for future generations. We could call it the original paying it forward. People saw how much prior generations sacrificed for them, and they decided to do the same for future generations. Something changed, though, with the baby boomer generation. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what changed to make the baby boomers different from every prior generation? I think I have an answer for you. Boomers lived during a time when their parents all faced massive hardship from living through 2 world wars and the Great Depression. Their parents, seeing the risk of nuclear war, decided to spoil their kids because they had no idea whether humanity would survive the Cold War. As an example of how this mentality was everywhere, the boomers grew up hiding under their desks in school to prepare for when the nuclear bombs dropped. They believed they would be the last generation because nuclear war was right around the corner. The boomers' parents were also extremely hardworking, so they would place their kids in front of a TV, expecting the television to instill into their kids the same moral values that they themselves held. Little did they know how different the values were of the people in media and entertainment from their own. Media and entertainment, as we have realized from the amount of wars they have manufactured consent for, are the propaganda arm of the American empire. So, for the first time in history, a generation was being raised nearly entirely by government via media and entertainment. That is without even getting into the indoctrination kids face from academic institutions, which were starting to be influenced by critical race theory. This nonstop propaganda on the boomer psyche has had a major impact on modern society. This mix of fatalism and lack of adaptations to mass media propaganda led to a generation of extremely selfish individuals. Many boomers are leaving their descendants no generational wealth and have not meaningfully contributed to their adult children's lives, either financially or in terms of teaching them values. They've built a system that steals money from future generations for their retirement with no plan to make sure it is sustainable after they are gone. Giving them at least a bit of benefit of the doubt here, it is possible some of them genuinely thought their policies were successful. It is worth remembering that the boomers inherited an empire with half the manufacturing capacity of the world. Literally anything they do would have led to a life of luxury for them. For these people, they didn't fully understand that something that benefits them in the short term might be detrimental to others in the long term. I believe most had to know, though, that they were squandering the future of their descendants and simply did not care. Truly, the boomers are a lost generation of little moral worth. There is no point in talking about Gen X because they are a generation that has had no power since the boomer generation has never passed on responsibility to younger generations. When the boomers die, it is likely either millennials will take over or America will just cease to exist. You have to remember that since boomers have never passed down responsibility, they are very likely to die without any younger generations having any experience in positions of power. My generation, the millennials, grew up in really unfortunate times. We lived long enough that we have had some early childhood memories of before the decline really set in. We graduated, though, from high school during the 2007-2008 financial crisis. We were told that unlike past generations, there weren't full or part-time jobs for us after high school, and the way forward was higher education. So we took out loans because the boomer government offered us primarily loans instead of grants. We became the most educated generation in history, and accumulated a lot of debt in the process. I personally finished my PhD in industrial and organizational psychology in May 2020. You know what else was happening during that time? The global pandemic, where most of the world decided to lock down. I specifically wanted to get a job in academia. Well, guess what? Most academic institutions had a hiring freeze that year. So it was literally the worst year in history to be entering the academic job market. So suffice to say, my generation has had it ridiculously rough. As you can see from the graph, despite how hard we have worked, we have not accumulated much wealth as a generation. I genuinely don't know if Gen Z will be left anything, given how things have been going. Between the economy and the increasing likelihood of a USA-China world war, they have little to look forward to. When Gen Z fully becomes adults, most boomers will be dead. The system was not built to last past the boomer generation, and Gen Z recognizes this. Gen Z is an extremely demoralized generation, and like Gen X and millennials, dislikes the boomer menace that has led to the rapid decline of America. So in summary, throughout history, people have sacrificed for future generations, but something changed with the baby boomer generation. Boomers lived in a time when their parents faced significant hardships from the Great Depression and the World Wars. During the Cold War, the boomers' parents feared nuclear war, so they spoiled their kids. The boomers' parents also raised them almost entirely through media and entertainment, and this has had a lasting negative impact on their psyche. This mix of fatalism and lack of adaptation to mass media propaganda led to a generation of extremely selfish individuals who are leaving their descendants with no generational wealth and have not meaningfully contributed to their lives. Most boomers squandered the future of their descendants and built a system that steals money from future generations for their retirement with no plan to make sure it's sustainable after they are gone. Millennials, on the other hand, have had it rough, graduating from college during the 2007-2008 financial crisis and now facing the pandemic. Gen Z, like millennials and Gen X, is demoralized and dislikes the boomer menace that has led to the rapid decline of America. My final thoughts that I leave you with are: reflect on the role of generational responsibility and sacrifice in creating a sustainable future. What can we do as individuals and as a society to ensure that we are not repeating the mistakes of the past and are actively working towards a better future for ourselves and for future generations? Also, how can we learn from the past and make changes to create a more sustainable society?